Welcome, everybody. I am your host, Francesca Warren from the Educators Room, and we are here tonight with one of my dear friends, Miss Dana Thomas, from Happy Teacher Revolution. And, I've known Dana for a long time, so Dana's going to introduce herself. Dana, I said your name right, right?
It's funny because at first I'm like, but then it did sound Dana. Yeah.
Dana, that's right. Okay. So let's talk about how I have known Dana since pre-COVID, right?
Yeah. Through a number
So
of life seasons.
yeah, number of life seasons. She wrote a book. I did something in the book. Um, I many moons ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, the Educators Room, we have the Teacher Self-Care Conference. And we started to do teacher self-care conferences all around the world. And one of the things that we did was we went through and we traveled all around the world. We had speakers about teacher mental health. Dana was a presenter. She was her business, Happy Teacher Revolution. And so I've known her through that. Dana, take a second and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, just your teaching background.
Fran, thank you so much for having me. This is a dream come true, and I'm just so humbled to be among so many different folks that you've featured in the Educators Room and a part of the Teacher Self-Care Conference. I'm joining you from Baltimore, Maryland, currently. I started my teaching journey because my teachers were my emotional first responders. They saved my life. I was a student that was struggling with mental health issues, anxiety, panic attacks. I was a type A overachiever, so to speak, and worked really hard on hiding the things that I was struggling with from my parents and from my friends. But my teachers recognized those subtle warning signs, encouraged me to seek treatment, to get help, and to choose life. I'm alive here talking with you today because of them. And when I became a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools, I recognized firsthand the lack of preparedness and ongoing support for the emotional demands of the job. Nobody was asking teachers, "Are you okay?" or "How are you really?" And so I was very outspoken about my mental health history. I was going to awareness walks with NAMI Maryland, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. I was speaking up on behalf of the Music for Mental Health campaign. And as a result, it became very apparent that there was a pattern of educators who were similarly struggling with stress, anxiety, and overwhelm as it relates to the job. And so a grassroots movement was born called Happy Teacher Revolution in Baltimore. And it really started to garner more and more attention because turns out teachers aren't just stressed in Baltimore. They're stressed all over, beyond the state borders of Maryland, beyond the borders of the United States, and even globally. And so we kept holding meetings, and an article went out about us in Education Week that went viral. I started hearing from people all over the country, all over the world saying, "Hey, how do I start one of these Happy Teacher Revolution support meetings where I'm from?" And so I took a leap of faith, made the bet on myself to launch Happy Teacher Revolution and dedicate myself full-time to leading this movement. Got support from the Johns Hopkins Social Innovation Lab to fund and scale Happy Teacher Revolution. And we have broadened our reach to not just the US, but around the world. I published and wrote a book, Happy Teacher Revolution, that Fran mentioned that she's a part of. There's a video of her in here. Her quotes are in here. And the connections with other incredible educators are in here. It features over 50 teachers, social workers, school psychologists, folks in all different capacities who really care about the mental health and well-being of the adults as a best practice to support kids. So I've spent the last year living on a converted school bus named Begonia. She's pink and she's my home on wheels. And I'll be on Begonia in a couple of weeks, but I've been traveling, holding support groups for teachers for free and doing book signings all along the way.
I love this. And we're going to talk about the Teacher Self-Care Conference, but I want to just talk to you guys about the statistics because way before it was cool, and I'm not saying for you, I'm saying just when I founded Teacher Self-Care Conference 2016-ish, it was not cool to talk about teacher mental health. And I had several people that were like, you know what? Well, that doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to talk to you guys about a survey we did. We did this after COVID, 2023, 2024. And we had a respondents of 1,500 educators who responded to this survey. Okay. The rate there were 90.7 of the percent of the teachers that we talked to said their level of stress was somewhat high, high, or extremely high. Okay. This is just off the cuff. We also had asked teachers what contributed to the occupational stress as an educator. 85% said demands of the job. 84%. Now remember, this is after COVID. This is when people were storming school board meetings, when people were, it's just all kind of shenanigans. Politics outside the classroom, 84.6. Resources, student behavior, parent unrealistic expectations, poor pay. These are just some of the comments that we had. We asked teachers, does your district have a policy around the emotional well-being of teachers? Over 87.8 respondents who worked in the school district without a policy around emotional well-being. However, 12.7 said they did have a district policy in place. So these are just some of the data, and I'll put the link in here along with Dana's book link so you guys can get. But this is telling us that there is a problem. And one of the things for me that I really, I had been a veteran teacher forever. I had worked in schools, and one of the things that I knew my mental health was suffering, when you get to that point where you're like, I don't know if I can go to work today. I can't go to work today. Like, I am to the point where I would rather check myself into a hospital than go to work. And the people won't say it, but it's what's happening. And there were so many people who were like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But it's true. And the more we traveled around and talked to presenters and talked to people, it was evident that nothing was being done. Not even from like the school side, but also the side of just policy. Just like, what does it look like? What does sick days look for teachers? What do they get mental health days? What are we doing about student behavior? What are we doing about unrealistic expectations? All of those things. So, you talked about teachers saved your life. Some people will say, oh, that's being dramatic, but literally, I know this is true because I've talked to teachers who have said, this has saved my life. So for you, can you talk, like, what is your definition of teacher mental health?
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much, Fran, for grounding and providing a foundation for this conversation in data, in research, in science, because I think that's the first thing, is that this isn't some fluffy, woo-woo, mysterious thing. We're data-driven in every other aspect of education, so it makes sense that we're data-driven here. And there really aren't enough of these conversations that are happening. So thank you for that work and the survey data and the research that you're doing. It's so profound and so important. When it comes to teacher mental health well-being, we're also grounded in research. We're using the RIFF scale of well-being, developed by Dr. Carol Riff, RYFF. And it's interesting because in our name, Happy Teacher Revolution, there's happy, but it's what we're really measuring is well-being. And well-being in the midst of extreme circumstances and in times that our teachers need to be resilient in the face of these extreme circumstances. So when we talk about well-being, there's 6 principles of well-being that we're measuring, that we're studying, and those are autonomy, environmental mastery, personal growth, purpose in life, positive relationships with others, and self-acceptance. So that's what we mean by well-being.
I love that. I love that it's grounded, and you're right in that. As we've done more and more research, the definition of well-being and what does it mean, and then what does it mean when you're talking about teachers? Yes. Now I want to talk a little bit about your Happy Teacher Revolution. And I know that you have been working with this for a long time, and so what do you think are the I don't want to say 3. What are the top drivers, in your opinion, of poor mental health among educators today? Like today, right now, 2025, what is it?
So the first thing I'd say is lack of preparedness and ongoing support. Like I had mentioned before, there are no praxis questions on compassion fatigue or toxic stress or moral distress. There aren't components that are baked into the pedagogy to prepare teachers for the emotional demands of the job, and specifically working with children who've experienced trauma firsthand. So we talk a lot in Happy Teacher Revolution about vicarious trauma, this idea that when you're working with individuals who have experienced trauma firsthand, you can take on the effects as if you have experienced that yourself. And trauma in a child's life can range from any number of things, whether it's losing a pet or losing a parent, moving neighborhoods, moving countries, experiencing a natural disaster, a flood, a hurricane, a fire, surviving a global pandemic, witnessing an act of gun violence are all incidents of trauma. So for me, that's the first driver, is this lack of preparedness and ongoing team building, a multi-tiered system of support for adult social emotional learning and adult well-being. The second thing I would say is systemic issues and lack of financial well-being. So I would be remiss not to say that the education system was not built with our well-being in mind. It was not built with student well-being in mind. So let that sink in, that it very much is something that has been put on the back burner and not prioritized. And the financial well-being piece, I mean, even before the pandemic, teachers were on the cover of Time magazine for selling their blood plasma because they weren't earning a living wage. And the third thing I would say is the overwhelming societal demands on schools. So teachers are facing immense demands. They're often acting as safety nets when society lacks them. They're expected to meet children's basic needs. And not to mention the emotional support. And there's a lot of invisible labor that's happening in school buildings where we're leaning on teachers to pick up the slack and do these extra things. And so I think the increased lack of demands of this plate that keeps getting piled with more and more and more on top of it, that teachers are now faced with recognizing signs of student suicide. When I was a student, 1 in 10 college students was contemplating suicide. Now that number is 1 in 5. Teachers are preparing for active shooter drills. There are so many things that teachers are facing that are really these societal demands.
It's so interesting that, I want to start with compassion fatigue. I taught in a under-resourced, underfunded schools my whole career. And just the trauma of having students being killed, rape, molestation, severe neglect, mental health that's not been diagnosed. It took a toll on me as a parent, like as a person, then as a parent. It was very hard for me to go back to my family and to be able to give them 100%. I couldn't. It took so much out of me. And, we talk about trauma for kids and we talk about ACE factors and we talk about these things. But in reality, the people who are on the other end helping those students, they are also feeling it. I mean, you hear the same when you talk to police officers, when you talk to medical professionals, you hear them say, yes, it's, people say, oh, it's just a gunshot, but the trauma of it just lives with you. And you're just, trying to figure out, what does that look like?
Exactly. And the cumulative effect of it. It's not like it's just one incident. And so as a result, and you mentioned compassion fatigue, it actually is over a long period of time, these feelings of burnout, of overwhelm, and it's stored and carried in the body. And so that facet of compassion fatigue is challenging to reverse because it's a loss of compassion for yourself and for others over that extended period of time.
For sure. How do we have a lot of teachers who are in the field right now who have never been formally trained on how to be a teacher. They are not trained. And the more that I go and talk to these teachers, there is a lack of not learning on them, like not saying they don't want to learn. I'm saying that we haven't provided them with the tools they're going to need to be effective educators.
Yeah.
And one of the things that what do we do to teach new educators about trauma? And Cassandra Washington, shout out to Cassandra. We love her. She is a school administrator. We're gonna have you on by yourself because I need to talk to you. So clear your schedule, ma'am. She talks about the mental health of administrators, right? And she said the body is a scorekeeper and the receptor of stress. So what do we do to prepare people who are going to go into a classroom. It is post-COVID, everything that has been exasperated by it. What do we do to teach teachers how to respond in those life or death situations that they can be sometimes?
Yeah. And there can even be micro moments of trauma too. So it might not be as extreme, but no matter what the incident, I think one of the first things is to encourage teachers not to take it personally, or to internalize it so much that it's about them necessarily, or even like a student's trauma response after the fact. That students might have experienced an incident of trauma. They might have ongoing trauma or generational trauma. So the first thing is that it's not personal. That child didn't wake up and roll out of bed just to push your buttons that day, which was, as a new teacher, it's like I took it personally. I thought to myself, I have this grad school assignment. I need to get my student work samples. I got to get the bulletin board up to take and it was like, and then everything would go haywire. And I'm like, why me? Why me? And it's like, it's actually not about you, So that's the first thing, is that to remind yourself that it's not personal. My second thing that I'd like to say is, it's part of our book and our 12 choices that we use in our meetings. It's part of our meeting protocol, but it's the second choice, and it's, I choose to disconnect and detach with love. There has to be a code switching, an unplugging way to literally power down and disconnect from a place of love for yourself, from a place of love for your students, from a place of love for your loved ones, to really disconnect. And I had a real problem with that when I first started teaching. Like, I'd take it all home with me, and I'd be laying in bed at night and just running through everything in my mind. The last thing would be mindfulness and gratitude. So I think teachers are so practiced in go, go, go. Okay, the next thing. What else do I have to do? We're really practiced in putting on a mask or a performance, and not necessarily sitting with some of the discomfort, or sitting with just ourselves. And a gratitude practice actually has neurological benefits, and scientific benefits, and improving immune function, things like that. But having a regular gratitude practice, and that could be even something that you do alongside with your students at the end of the class period or the end of the school day, to have a gratitude practice. We have a Spark Joy folder recommendation in the book. So if there's just a note from somebody that you care about, or maybe a photograph, or whatever brings you joy and reminds you of what you're grateful for, that can be a really helpful resource just to open and to have those bright spots. We call them glimmers rather than triggers. This was a strategy that was created by Deb Dana, who has done a lot of research in polyvagal theory. So the idea is like, with trauma, triggers are something that kind of like cause this maybe downward spiral, or these incidents of stress. So the opposite is a glimmer or a bright spot, or these micro moments of joy that can really have a transformative effect.
I love that glimmers. I
Yeah.
love that glimmers. That's
A
so
glimmer from you, Fran.
I love that. I love that. We talk about the financial. You didn't call it financial abuse, but what did you call it? Financial what?
I think I might have said even lack of financial well-being.
Oh, yes. So, right now we are in a country where a lot of teachers' jobs are at stake, right? You have federal funding that's been cut. Well, first off, the grants, there were billions of dollars in grants for mental health for kids. It's been cut, right? You have billions of federal dollars being cut, they're being held, even though it's been approved. And right now, lots of teachers are saying, I might not have a job next semester, or I'm not next year, or my program might be cut, or, my kids who need mental health the most won't get the services because the grant is gone. Or my kid we have a provider who comes in and provides services, and Medicare will not reimburse us. So the school district won't be able to do it. There's a lot of financial uncertainty. And we talked about this a little bit. And I'll share this. I'm not about you. This is about me. I had a coworker, I had a friend that I had worked with. They had left teaching for a while, and they left just for a myriad of things. And they're thinking about coming back. And I remember them telling me about how embarrassed they were to have to come back into the classroom. And we're talking, and I said, I wouldn't be embarrassed. I said, I love teaching. I love getting in front of kids. I love teaching. Even this new realm after COVID, right? And I talked to them about, right now people are having to make hard decisions. So what do you mean when you talk about that not having financial well-being? What does that mean?
Yeah. So as a result of not having financial well-being, I mean, it's almost like this undercurrent of stress or this background noise of stress that feels omnipresent and always there. I I think it actually, again, it's like a carrying of dissonance of stress in the body, affects sleep, affects REM cycles, all of these things. I think uh, sometimes a knee-jerk response to that feeling of overwhelm is to just, like an ostrich, bury your head in the sand and be like, I don't want to address it. I don't want to think about it. I'm not going to look at my bank account. I'm not going to think about this. But really, that avoidance kind of only compounds or snowballs. So my first suggestion is to, I would say, do your homework, and look at what resources are available. Unfortunately, teachers very much are preyed upon by salespeople, in the teachers' lounge when they bring in the free pizza and they say, "Hey, sign this up, this for this X, Y, and Z." And I love what Cassandra just said. If your money isn't right, it affects so much of your life and your health. Absolutely, like the ripple effect continues. So I would encourage folks to do their homework, check out HYSA's high yield savings accounts, invest in a HYSA. And, I would be data driven. Like, look at where your money's going. Is it something you care about? Or is the money that you're spending on things that pour into your well-being, or are there things that you can adjust? I think that the self-care lens in terms of social media and marketing, it's a billion-dollar industry. And so a lot of times self-care looks like it's this privileged thing, that it's treating yourself, but really it's taking care of yourself. And that's actually something Alexis Shepard shared in the book, that self-care isn't treating yourself, it's taking care of yourself. So it's taking care of your finances and looking at what's your budget, what are you spending money on, what are ways that you can ask and leverage things to get help from outside sources. I mean, I think of other caregiver professions, service professions, and it's not like doctors and nurses have to pay for their own needles or police officers have to buy the handcuffs. So I would say this might be an invitation to set some boundaries around what you're spending, and what that might look like, and to really prioritize yourself. The financial well-being, it's all about pouring into yourself first, and getting yourself rooted in that, because the martyrdom complex is so real in education, of self-sacrificing and pouring yourself out, lighting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. And that's simply not sustainable.
Yeah. And to understand, there are so many people who literally function in the space of, I'm going to sacrifice myself. And when you talk financial, and it's interesting because we talked about this before we went on air, my friend, he was like, well, I'm not going to go teach because I feel like he felt ashamed to do it because he had left to be this influencer, right? And I told him, I said, well, you got a mortgage to pay, right? You got things to do. So there's a part of me that's telling you, like Cassandra said, if your money isn't right, you're never going to be happy. So sometimes that means, making some hard decisions about where you work and what you do, but also knowing, like you said, like, what are some tools that I can use? Because, we meet with teachers who, maybe in California or New York, who are well into making six figures. They're well into making six figures. They're making very well. And it's a very different life than if you live in Mississippi, rural Mississippi, and you're a teacher and you're barely making $35,000. So those are important. What was your third? You gave a third reason. I should have wrote it down right here, but I didn't. It was after financial, and you can share, if you want to share a slide deck, you can also share it.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I don't have a slide deck, but I can get you some. I mean,
you're good.
I would say that, I think it was the overwhelming societal demands on schools.
Yes. I mean, teachers are, we see it every day where teachers are asked not to just teach, they're asked to raise children. essentially, right? And it feels good, but you can't do it long term. It burns you out. So
Yeah.
what are teachers telling you about those changes and how it's impacting them as professionals
Yeah.
or those demands?
So I would say the top three things, especially in the advent of post-pandemic and after COVID, was the compounding stress of adjusting to new formats. When we think about 5 years ago, teachers picked up right away into the
Mhm.
virtual space. We didn't even have time to process. Like
At
it
all.
just went right away. So I honestly feel like there's a backlogged amount of just processing the immense amount of changes that have happened, the intensified stress levels, adjusting to virtual, adjusting to these different curriculums, all of these moving parts, everything shifting, teachers who were retiring early, who are leaving the classroom. The second thing I would say is the increased emotional burden. So the emotional care and teachers who entered the profession in 2020 that they didn't know what it was like to not be a pandemic teacher. And so that was one thing I heard from the higher ups was they're saying, I'm supposed to coach these people in content, in their lesson plans, and they're on the phone crying, overwhelmed and isolated. So I think the emotional care burden and the last is just the persistent challenges that we're still facing the aftermath of the pandemic, of every child who experienced that, along with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where Happy Teacher Revolution, where I'm really proud of what these teachers are building and how it's growing, that we launched pilot sites at school districts and schools before the pandemic. They kept holding meetings throughout COVID, transitioned to this virtual space, but they kept collecting data. And we found that our Happy Teacher sites were in the top tier of well-being compared to places that weren't, and that 93% of respondents were sharing that there was a colleague or coworker they could count on no matter what, that in this extremely isolating time, that there was this sense of belonging and camaraderie.
Yeah. I love that. And I love and you did it before. So now self-care has become like super chic, right?
Yeah, I know, right? Like we were trendsetters, weren't we, Fran?
Listen, that's why I
Like
still
you
hold the
said, like,
trademark for it. I'm like, listen, yeah. One of the things that it's gotten chic, it feels like you said, it feels like you need privilege to access it, how people are packaging it. And a lot of times, my definition of self-care has changed. And now it means, me being able to get up on my own pace, or like a slow morning, or like, sunshine, or like just calmness, like just calm after the pandemic, like just calmness. So, when you talk about that, people are going to say, well, what can we do? Like they want a packaged up, here you go. But what we learned in the teacher self-care conference is just that space. That space is important. It's not so much like you can't buy it. We can give you resources and tools, but it's not meant for us to commoditize it and be like, buy this and you're going to be mentally well. That's not what we're saying. So what are some of the things that you're saying, like, hey, here are things that help immediately, like people can do right now?
Yeah. So I appreciate you linking the book. I mean, this is a great resource where you can just flip to any page and find actionable go-to strategies that will help you tomorrow morning. I think that, like you had said, the space, that's exactly what we say with Happy Teacher Revolution, that these meetings provide the time and space for educators to feel, deal, and be real about the social emotional demands of the job. I think that this opportunity to connect with one another face to face, the human interaction, cell phones away, is what people are really craving, especially in the advent of AI and all the tech advancements, that people are really craving that human, authentic human connection with other adults. Teaching can be so isolating and so lonely. We're with kids all day long, but we don't necessarily have the chance to connect with coworkers, with colleagues, with folks who are normalizing boundary setting, saying no, actually taking a sick day when you're sick instead of wearing it like a badge of honor. I want to go back to the survey data that you had shared of those over 1,500 respondents that you said 90, I believe it was 90.3% of folks experiencing these overwhelming levels of stress. And before the pandemic, I'll be honest with you, Fran, like I was so focused on that 90.3 and the burnout level and how can we reduce burnout. then a flip switched for me. And instead of focusing on that 90.3, now we're focused on that 9.7. And what are they doing? And how do we quantify that? And how do we measure that? And so in this new frontier of teacher well-being and mental health research, come to find out there's two big issues in the field today. The first is that there is such a focus on the barriers, the issues, the problems, what's wrong. There's not necessarily a focus on the solutions or the protective factors. The second big thing is that we're conflating a lack of burnout with well-being. So just because teachers are less burnt out doesn't mean they're well. Just because teachers are surviving doesn't mean that they're thriving. And so that's what I'm really excited about with Happy Teacher Revolution. We have new research and data coming out this year where we're able to share that for folks who have participated and joined Happy Teacher Revolution and have educated themselves with the data with this research, that they're over 6 times more likely, 6x more likely to stay in the field, which is unprecedented. There has never been research until now linking teacher well-being to retention. There has been work done about burnout, again, about these issues and the problems. But what we're trying to prove here is that when teachers are well, they stay. And when teachers are well, students do better.
I love that. And I love that you're getting into the research side of it for a couple of reasons, is that it's longevity, right? So it's something, it lives, research lives, and you can always access it. But it's also putting, where you talk about putting the money where your mouth is, right? Pre this administration, research has been really important in how we do things. So when we're talking about looking at that research, that study will stay, and it can be, a seminal study, and that people are going to use 10, 15 years from now to say, what else do we need to know about this phenomenon? Because right now, during COVID, teachers were revered, like, oh my gosh, teachers, thank you for all you're doing. After COVID, we became the enemy, and now we are seeing the result of us vilifying public ed and education just in general. There will come a time where we'll come back and people will say, well, how do we fix what we've messed up, right? And your research will be there to help. Your research, other people's research will be there to say, hold on, here's what we need to do. This is where we're lacking, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
We talked about this. I'm going to find the question, y'all, because Dana told us, she was like, I love this question. Actually, we just answered it. I was going to say,
we actually just answered it. Yeah, I wanted to have this conversation because again, it makes complete sense, but the research hasn't existed. And this is such a new field to even consider teacher mental health and well-being. And Fran, like you were saying, when this journey first started for us years before the pandemic even happened, where we had our pulse on identifying that there was a pandemic of teacher stress and burnout before the COVID pandemic existed, that it was not trendy to talk about self-care. What was trendy was the posts on social media about the teachers crying in their car before going into work that day. And I had felt really isolated in my job. I was experiencing workplace bullying, which, come to find out, 80% of teachers have either experienced or witnessed workplace bullying in schools. Forbes magazine came out with an article that said the exemplar for miserable workplaces in the U.S. are our U.S. school system. Look no further than a school building to know exactly what not to do for adults when it comes to workplace well-being. And so I started Happy Teacher Revolution from a place of pain and desperation, from a really dark place. My biggest class size was 39 kindergartners in my classroom with no heating, no air conditioning. Like, it's obscene, right? And so I thought, I might not have my people in this brick and mortar building, but there's got to be people out there who align with this well-being message. I felt so isolated, so alone. And so I started our social media page. It's unbelievable to think that's grown to almost 70,000 strong. And it's encouraging to know that And if for anybody that's listening, if you feel alone in your building or in your school community, if you feel isolated, if you feel like you can't relate to anybody, we're here, we're out there, and we're here to connect with you. And so I think that's what's really important, is that when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs for our students, it translates to us too. That sense of belonging, that sense of safety, that sense of feeling like you can be a whole person with your basic needs. So that way you can reach those higher levels of Maslow's to self-actualize. It definitely applies to us too.
It's so interesting you said that. Like, the common thread is that's why I started the Educators Room. Not so much the bullying, but the space of finding people that wanted to be the type of teacher that I wanted to be. Yeah. And that's and have the conversations that I wanted to have. So I think that belonging, like maybe there's some research in there, like what do teachers do when they want that belonging feeling? And when we talk about bullying, that's a whole, like, there was just an article a newer educator wrote, so actually a white paper about the politics of being in a school building as a new teacher and getting along with older teachers and the ageism. And it is put people on fire. They're like, we don't, it's very interesting. It's a totally different topic. But when you said that, I was like, oh, that hits right there. Yeah. I want to talk about, when we said teachers, in our survey, we found that teachers said they're carrying the emotional weight of everyone in the building, right? So like the kids, the expectations of the principal, they're feeling it. They're feeling weighed down. Mm-hmm. What do you see, feel, think? How do you set boundaries, right? Because it is July 23rd. Many teachers, if you're in the South, you go back to school this week, next week. School's going to start in August. Sometimes in the, just depending on where you are, it's going to start after Labor Day. But how do teachers set boundaries? Like, what are some practical things they can say, they can do that says, you know what, this is where this is where I say no.
Yeah. Boundary setting is self-care. Like, that's the biggest thing you can do for self-care. And boundary setting can be really challenging, because if you are somebody who hasn't had boundaries to begin with, there might be a lot of people that push back and are resistant to you having the boundaries. And oftentimes I'll tell teachers that the folks who are pushing back or resisting or feel some sort of way about your boundaries are probably the people who took advantage of your lack of boundaries to begin with. So it's going to be kind of like a moment of growing pains and like a training ground, just like they encourage teachers at the beginning of the school year. Those first 2 weeks of school are so important, and you really got to be, I'm not going to say rigid, but I would say you have to be really steadfast in your classroom rules and your procedures and expectations. And that's when the boundary setting is going to be a great bang for your buck. And so some of that might look like or include closing your door during your planning period. I would always leave my door open and people come in and out and chit chat and whatever, and I wouldn't get work done. And so I'd be staying after school and taking all this extra time. But think about how you can leverage your planning time to really be planning time and not necessarily be an opportunity to connect or I don't know. To really prioritize your needs during your planning time. Another thing would be tech boundaries. So putting on a way message, let's say at 5 p.m. every day, I am no longer available via email. If you'd like to make an appointment, I am available on this day and time, so to speak. Some people will delete their work email from their phone so that they're only checking email when they're at their desktop at work. Some people have even delete their email and re-upload it the next day. But I think the tech boundaries can be really important. And when you have those in place and when you actually stick to them, you have to be the one that's sticking to them. Folks will eventually adjust and know, okay, I can't reach her on the weekends, or I can't contact this teacher at 9 p.m. at night on a school night. So I think those types of boundaries are really important.
Come off mute. I love that, because it's like, it's the small things, right? It's not answering your email. It's saying, hey, I like my job. I appreciate my job, but I'm not available here. One of the things I can say this for my oldest child, there were sometimes I missed his programs because I was at school. And there's been a point where I'm like, no, I'm not missing my kid's stuff. Absolutely not. I'm not doing it. And if I have to take a personal day, I'll take a personal day. And, teachers have said that, just being very upfront. And for some teachers, it can feel like very hostile, right, to say that. But when you're talking about the difference in you being able to function as a professional and in your other life, then it becomes something where you're very stringent about. You're very much like, I can't sacrifice that, especially when you're in recovery, especially when you're recovering from mental health, just compassion fatigue, all of those things. um we talked about this a little bit in pre-COVID. We did a lot of work on it. We're still gathering data. Have you thought about in your work, have school systems really adopted a policy or a practice, or anybody around the well-being of teachers? Have you
Yes.
seen that? And if not, what would you like legislators to do?
Yeah, they do exist. They really do. And it's amazing because when you walk into those buildings or those school districts where teacher well-being is a top priority, you
Mhm,
feel it. Like in the air that you breathe and walking through
mhm,
the hallway, it's like, wow, they really are all in on this.
mhm,
So I'll talk about a couple different places. One school district has adopted Happy Teacher Revolution, and not just the teachers, like anybody in the school district,
mm,
whether they are a lunch lady, a bus driver, a school secretary, a superintendent, a paraprofessional, they're all in. They're part of the Happy Teacher Revolution movement. They're having the meetings. They're using the language of the 12
mhm,
choices. So the superintendent is using the same language that the teachers are. Like, I choose to disconnect and detach with love, or I choose to set boundaries, so on and so forth. So I think that makes a big difference when everybody's in on it, that it isn't just something that teachers are doing at the ground level, but they say, hey, my boss believes in this and stands by this. It makes really a ton of difference. Another school I'm thinking of is a trauma-informed school in Nashville that started Happy Teacher Revolution. They integrated components of the Happy Teacher meeting into
mm,
the physical building. So teachers have the 12 choices that are printed and posted on their bulletin board by the desk. And the principal has printed out the affirmations that we use at the end of meetings, like I'm grateful for, or I forgive myself for, or I recognize the courage it took for me to, so that as people are leaving the building, kids, adults, parents, stakeholders, whoever, they're using these affirmations. So I think that's what's been really powerful, is how folks have incorporated it into the fabric of what they're doing. When it comes to policymakers,
mm,
this needs to be something that folks um, at the high level are talking about and standing
mm,
by. In terms of supporting teacher mental health and well-being, Oregon has been a state that has done this really well. Interestingly enough, Utah is another state. The first lady is a former educator and really stands by
mm,
mental health and well-being.
yeah.
Colorado is a state that has had a lot of
Mhm.
Happy Teacher Revolution sites start. So I think that it is something that is slowly happening, but there absolutely needs to be more of.
Absolutely. Can you talk about, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit, what does a Happy Teacher Revolution meeting look like? Like,
Yeah,
what does it look like? What does it look like? I'm curious about that. And
yeah.
I've been to
So,
your session. Her sessions are fabulous. So
well,
when she was doing our conference, she was like, it was fabulous. And if we ever do another one, I told her before I said we will do a smaller one. We'll do a symposium. I probably won't have more than 100 people. Like that's my limit. I need it small. But what does it look like?
yeah. So happy teacher meetings, they're not meant to be therapy. It's not a therapeutic space. It's not an advice giving space. It's not AA. You're allowed to drink afterwards, but you do sit in a circle. Folks, first and foremost, sign a waiver to, again, verify that it's not therapeutic, and that it's not meant to substitute for therapy. While we do hope that folks might consider different well-being practices as a result of the meeting, but that's the first thing, is the waiver. The next portion is a moment of mindfulness. We really believe in the science behind mindfulness and meditation. So every meeting starts with mindfulness. Then an introduction of members. It's important that teachers are code switching from their last names to their first names. A lot of times we don't even know each other's first names because we're on a last name basis. Then there is the reading of the 12 choices, which I mentioned before. And the 12 choices are also in the book, that I've designed these coloring pages for. So here's an example. I choose to enjoy the relationships that matter. So we go through each one of those, and there's a crosstalk statement to again reiterate that we're not giving advice and we're instead using iMessages. And then it's an open share. So folks can really take the meeting in whichever direction it goes. Some people worry it's a vent session of just too much venting. But I'd argue that teachers need a space to let it all out, to not necessarily censor themselves, and to have the freedom to really communicate what's weighing on their heart. And also to celebrate those wins, like I had mentioned before, of setting boundaries, of saying no, of taking a sick day when you're sick. There isn't necessarily a room that is going to applaud you when you turn down the invitation to lead the committee for the X number of year in a row. So I think that's what's really important, is that we're really celebrating and uplifting each other. And then every meeting also includes any well-being related announcements. Sometimes there's different promos that are happening for teachers, teacher discounts, or free apps for teachers, or things like that. And then we finally end with personal positive affirmations, which I had mentioned before. So I forgive myself for, I recognize the courage it took for me to. And then we have a call and response where the facilitator will say, you can't pour from an empty bowl. And respondents will say, you can't teach from an empty soul. And that's it.
I love
Yeah.
that. I love it in that it's not surface. And so people can't get away with just being, you know what I mean? Like you get somewhere and people just aren't engaged and
Yeah.
you lose the purpose. And it's like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work. And sometimes as teachers, we don't talk about this, but sometimes, I don't know if negative is the word, but sometimes we don't allow ourselves to feel things that are going to make us change. And I'm saying this as a teacher, right? There have been plenty of times where I'm like, for me, the solution is very simple. Like I'm like you said, like boundaries. You're not calling me after work. That's my boundary, right? But sometimes we allow it and then we complain about it. And I'm like, okay. So I love that your meetings are very involved and tuned in to like what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And venting is fun. I mean, I vent to my husband all the time. I vent to my, it's like, I don't like this and I need to get it out. Then I can talk about what's next. Ruth says, yes, I enjoyed her session. Sorry, I was crying, but I was really at a bad school when I was there. This was at the 2019 conference in Atlanta. Yes. We're going to bring it back, but y'all, it's going to be small. I'm telling you, I can't do more than 100 people. I'm like, listen, we've got to focus smaller, but your sessions are good. Your sessions are good and they're packed and people like them.
Oh, and thank you, Ruth, for being so vulnerable and sharing that. And I think a lot of times when emotions come up like that, it's because it's finally a safe space for those emotions to arise. You know what I mean? And that's really what this is meant to be, is a safe space, a brave space, for folks to be their authentic selves, and to sit with those emotions for a little bit and to be witnessed in that, to see and to witness and to know each other.
It makes me think about, let's say that, and this is usually the last question, but this is the second to last question. Let's say that tomorrow you are over a lab school of kinders. It's maybe pre-K through 2, right? And you have the chance to redesign the school year, the teacher schedule, just the school, the systems of the school, to promote wellness for kids and also for staff. What changes would you make?
More play.
I love it.
More play and more rest. I think that it's so important that, we prioritize play. We prioritize those social emotional skills for the adults, for the grownups, and for the students. I tell people that everything that I learned about self-care, I learned in kindergarten. My kindergartners taught me the importance of play, of recess, of getting outside and getting moving, of taking a snack break when I'm hangry, of using the bathroom so I don't wet myself, like all of these things, like the basics. So shout out to my former students. And I think if I were to redesign the school day and the school structure, it would be to build connection and capacity for connection amongst the adults. there needs to be way more time spent, again, for the time and space to exist, for the adults to feel, deal, and be real amongst each other to foster that community. I think to myself, how different would the world be if every child from pre-K through 12th grade for 13 years, there was an adult in front of that child who was well rested, hydrated, eating healthy, had a loving and rich personal life with their loved ones outside of the workday. What would that look like? How different would that be for that child for 13 years and then to enter the world with an adult caregiver
Yeah.
who's really pouring from a full cup instead of an empty one?
Yeah. And it's so interesting you talk about sleep. I mean, did you say rested? You said
Yeah, well rested. Yes.
because I've been doing a lot of research because for years I've skipped on my sleep. And just the research around people that you need to sleep. It literally makes your brain, like it recalibrates your body, your brain. And so when you start to talk about, why kids are, they're up all night, they're gaming all night, they're on their computers, teachers are up all night, on social media trying to relax. And it can take, not resting has dire consequences.
Yeah. And there's actually one of our revolutionaries. So one of the teachers who's gone through the Happy Teacher Revolution training and who's started to lead meetings. And it's now one of our trainers to train more folks to lead Happy Teacher Revolution meetings. She's based in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And for her professional plan at work, she made her goal professionally sleep.
Yeah.
So she connected her sleep and tracking her sleep to her professional goals at work and found that not only did that improve, but student achievement improved. And there has been all of these positive results after she's prioritized her sleep, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's been game changing for me. If you're watching this, and guys, you'll get a recording of this, prioritizing my sleep, and like sometimes like, whether it's magnesium, whether it's, just a cream for me to sleep better, has revolutionized my health.
Yes.
I have to ask this, what gives you hope for teacher mental health / well-being? And what are the small wins, the stories that keep you going in your work? Because it can feel heavy, I'm sure. I'm sure it can feel very heavy for you.
Yeah. And it does. The wins for me are hearing from teachers about their reinvigoration in the classroom. It's hearing from their loved ones saying, my wife is a different person walking through the door at the end of the day. Hearing from their children saying, my mom is here with us on the weekend. She's not going back into the building. It's hearing from teachers who struggled with infertility and miscarriages and said, I finally prioritized my well-being, and now they have healthy children. My bright spots have been on this book tour, living on my school bus, which has been a dream of mine, to be Miss Frizzle and to roll through town on my pink school bus and to do these book signings where people there is somebody who said they were just walking by. They had been teaching for nearly 20 years, had been so overwhelmed and so burnt out, and were really questioning whether they even wanted to be in the classroom, and just happened to stumble upon the book signing, and said to me, quote, that it was like falling into a positive Twilight Zone. And I'm like, that is the best review I could ever get.
I love it. I love that. You need to put that at the beginning of your next book. Like that needs to be front and center, baby. Front and center. Front and center.
Yeah, like the Tower of Terror, but joy.
But joy. Question, let's say you get a $10 million grant. We're going to speak that into existence for you. $10 million grant. Receive it. It's coming. And you can use it on anything. What are you doing? What's the first thing that you're doing?
We're launching Happy Teacher Revolution in every school, or at least the ones who want to be a part of it. Because I do know that we're not for everyone. And the spectrum of readiness, not everyone is ready to talk about mental health and well-being and invest in it. So if I were to receive that grant, it would be to help our folks in schools and districts that don't have the funding to launch Happy Teacher Revolution, to get all of those teachers an Aura Ring, which is a device that tracks that biometric data like sleep, like heart rate, so that we can get that biometric data to show, hey, look at this before a meeting versus after a meeting, and what it looks like before starting Happy Teacher and after 6 meetings or a dozen meetings. I would, to be honest, I would love for there to be more buses, buses of joy, a whole fleet of them, like Mad Max. Rolling through town, and to be honest, I think it would be amazing to have a well-being hub in every school district next to the district offices and like headquarters, that there was a well-being brick and mortar space for teachers to have Happy Teacher meetings, to get chiropractic or acupuncture care, to have an opportunity for teachers to really have that space that is for their well-being, full stop.
I love that. That's so cool. And we're speaking that into existence for you. We're speaking that, you can continue to partner with research facilities, and you have the chance to get grant money for you to pay yourself. So let's be very transparent, pay yourself, take care of your needs so that you can take care of everybody else. Guys, if you haven't already, I want you to share this book with everybody you know. Share this book with everybody. As a matter of fact, I'm going to purchase some copies and we're going to give them away. We're going to have a giveaway on the site, on the Educator.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
I want to purchase them from Amazon. So send me the link where I can purchase them, where you can get the majority of the money. And we're going to give them away to our viewers. So we're just going to run some contests and give them away in some kits, because you look at Theo Huxtable passed 2 days ago. Ozzy Osbourne. Life is so precious. You don't know when you're going to go. Of course, Ozzy kind of knew he was at the end of stage, but for the most part, you don't know. And so what we can do while we're on this earth is try to spread as much good, do as much as we want to do, and hopefully be alive to talk about it. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you're like, I got to say this. I need to talk about this?
Well, I think what I got to say is for teachers to really take the time to pour into their well-being, if they want to be a part of this movement and part of the revolutionary change in the first ever data, first ever research about why teacher mental health matters, please reach out, check out the book, check out our website, happyteacherrevolution.com. We want to help you. We want to be there for you. And ultimately, this benefits students. The best thing that you can do for your students is take care of yourself. The best social emotional learning curriculum that money can buy is actually you living those principles of self-care and relationship care and modeling those practices. So I think it's just so important to reiterate that this is the best professional development there is. Teacher self-care conference, educators room, like this is the real PD. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Share this with a friend, share this with a coworker. I mean, this is so grassroots. Fran and I are teacher-founded, teacher-led organizations. This isn't big business. This isn't something that like the big bucks corporate moneymakers are doing, which the PD industry is. It's $18,000 per teacher that's spent every year on PD. And so I think for the folks that are teacher-led, are women-led movements, organizations are really important to invest in because teachers find credibility with other teachers. I mean, this works and it matters. And so it goes a long way. So, oh my gosh. And yes, on Audible, thank you for saying that, Professor, because I got to narrate this in New York City last year. I was in the studio, I was reading it. So yeah, the book's available on Audible, on Spotify. So listen to it during your commute or while you're making copies and things like that. It was really fun to narrate. So thank you, Fran, for giving voice to teachers, for providing this platform. I just respect you tremendously. I'm going to try not to cry as I say this, of how humbled and honored I am to be a part of this. I've always looked up to you. I consider you a mentor. I want to be you when I grow up. You are so inspiring. And I adore you with my whole heart.
Thank you so much. Guys, this is what we do. Every Wednesday, we come together. We talk about real topics. We have real teachers on. We discuss things. Next week, we're talking about the federal spending. We're talking about the big, beautiful bill. We might have a congressperson on. Wow. Fingers crossed. But we're committed to having these conversations, because just as much as we talk about the federal things that are happening, the link to teacher mental health is critical, and the link to this affects us locally. So we thank you. We appreciate you. Guys, please visit us, theeducatorsroom.com, and sign up for our next webinar, which is next Wednesday at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we love you. We thank you.
Yay!